Hello everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, Ending Non-Consensual Filming and Distribution of the Pornographic Videos. The challenges, best practices, and lessons in various countries. Good morning and good afternoon and konbanwa. I'm Hiroko Goto, professor of Chiba University Law School and vice president of Human Rights Now, which organizes this session. This session is part of the CSW parallel event. It's held in New York. And Human Rights Now is international human rights NGO based in Tokyo. In today's digital world, many people suffer from non-consensual filming and distributing of pornographic videos, and as a result, victims of forced appearance in the pornographic video have to live their life with so-called digital footprints or digital tattoos. Even the sexual images is posted uh, in consensual also will have the same problems. Today, we have invited experts from the US and the UK to learn about the challenges and the practices related to non-consensual porn and also the consensual the sexual images. Considering the nature of cyberspace, we will also talk about cross-jurisdictional cases in order to explore ways to tackle the issue across the borders. So it is my great honor to introduce four wonderful guest speakers here with us. Miss Lorna Woods, and professor of internet law at University of Essex. Sorry, so much. And also Miss Sophie Mortimer, manager of the Revenge Porn Helpline and of the Stop NIC, NCII.org. And Miss Michelle Gonzalez, executive director of Cyber Civil Rights Initiatives, and Miss Cindy Gallop, founder and CEO of Make Love Not Porn. Thank you all for joining us. And my colleague Kazuko Ito, Vice President of Human Rights Now and attorney at law in Japan, will also give a presentation. So before we started, and I will explain what's going on in our panels. After every speaker has 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes presentation, and we will have a panel discussion, and then after we will have a question and answer session. So if you have a question to the speakers, please write your comments and the questions and the Q&A box in Zoom. And if your question is intended for specific speaker, please write the name of the speaker. Please note, you may not be able to answer all questions because of time limited. So we will start now. And now I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Roma. Sorry, my pronunciation is something very wrong. Please start your presentation, Rona.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me here today, and to the audience. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as the case may be. I start with an apology. I feel somewhat of a fraud on this panel because I am not an expert in image-based abuse. I am a professor of internet law at the University of Essex, and so my expertise comes from that field. But increasingly, it seems that there is a connection, an overlap. We see that social media, for example, can be used as a space where predators, for want of a better word, can find information to groom people, to be able to exploit them subsequently, or to make false advertisements for modeling positions. And also, more basically, they are platforms on which people share material they've created. And there seems to be an increasing problem of the sharing by so-called boyfriends of videos and photographs of their girlfriends without consent, without knowledge. So there is an overlap, I think, between the regulation, the attempts to regulate the internet and social media in particular, and this question. So what I'm going to talk about today is a project I've been involved in with a number of charities and NGOs. And so the name check is Carnegie UK Trust, and Violence Against Women and Girls, Glitch, NSPCC, Refuge, the Five Rights Foundation, and also Professor Claire McGlynn, who is an expert in image-based abuse. She is at the law school at Durham University. Now, what we did was talk about a code of practice to sit against the proposed regulatory regime in the UK, what's currently the Online Safety Bill. So this talk will focus on that, but I would say at this point that my opinion is that the approach taken in this code is quite flexible. Yes, the version we've come up with is designed for the UK environment, but I think it could be used, suitably tweaked, of course, in another national environment as a self-regulatory code or in the context of international law. So before I talk about the code itself, I want to talk briefly about the approach that this code uses. And that's what I have called a systems-based approach to regulation. When we talk about image-based abuse and the cause and the solutions of it, often the questions relate to takedown, to removing the images. And that is undoubtedly an important part of the question. But it's not the only issue. If we look at social media, they are the environment, they create the environment in which these images are shared. And so they have a role in creating the problem, as well as just being the place where the problem is found. They're not neutral in that regard. So to elaborate this, I want to talk about a 4-stage model that we used. Now, the first is about content creation. And by that, I mean, how do we think about the creation of accounts? Are disposable accounts and anonymous accounts possible? We can then think about the filters and the controls on the uploading of content. Are there any? Or do they make the uploading one-click uploads of photographs and videos very easy? we can then think about discovery and navigation. And this brings us into a terrain that I think has become a bit more popular or well known of late. And that is that the social media and also search engines tend towards perhaps more extreme content in an attempt to maintain user engagement, to keep people on the platforms, to keep generating data and eyeballs for advertising. So this advertising-driven model means that it is in the platform's interest to prioritize content that is more extreme, elicits a stronger response. And I would say pornography of all types fits into that description, but we can see this also as a vector in particular for non-consensual porn. It is possibly also an environment where perhaps non-consensual porn can be found and shared by those who are interested in it. We then come to the third stage, which is the user response. To what extent can users complain about content or flag content as problematic? To what extent can they protect themselves against content they don't want to see? And then finally, we come to the last stage, which is the content moderation and the content takedown and the ease of those platforms providing easy complaints mechanisms, especially if we think of the specificities around image-based abuse. Do we really think that drop-down menus are a way forward? Forms that perhaps require the full filling in of names and addresses? Perhaps there are other ways of complaining when sensitive matters are in issue. So that is the framework. And what I did with Carnegie and the other groups was to develop a code that looked at all these four stages in the communication chain. And I'm just going to share my screen with you because hopefully you will see now the code that we came up with. And you can see that as the starting point, we've actually got two main principles that sit even before we get onto the distribution chain. And that is, first of all, acknowledging the responsibility of the platforms, the services themselves, for the design of their service, and that they should have a responsibility for risk assessment, risk mitigation, and remediation. And that this is accepted at the highest level in the company, board level. Now, this is, in a way, following the approach that we see in the Ruggie principles, the UNGPs on responsible business, but also the approach that the OECD took in its human rights and business guidance. The other main principle you can see there is safety by design, that when platforms are designing their service, they should actually think about the risks and think about the risks for distinct population groups within not just users, but within the population as a whole, so that they should try to come up with appropriate safeguards, or perhaps even not deploy some tools because of the risks. We could think, for example, can you really provide a nudification app that is safe by design? I can't think of a way, because and perhaps people can come up with other examples. But on the whole, it is about taking control from the victim and turning them into a sexual object. If you look down to sections 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the code, you can see here that 4-stage model coming through. So looking at the safeguards around access to the online service. Now, there's something here to be said about anonymous and throwaway accounts. That some people have pointed the finger at these sorts of accounts in terms of online abuse, and particularly campaigns of online abuse. But there is a huge advantage to anonymous accounts for some forms of vulnerable groups. So it is not that features are automatically bad or good, but just that they each carry a risk. So if we look at anonymity, there was a proposal when the Digital Services Act went through, which was ultimately rejected, but dealt with the issue of non-consensual images being shared. And that was to say that platforms should have a system whereby those people wanting to upload or share intimate images should at least be identifiable by the platform, so that then subsequently, if there turned out to be a problem, and perhaps for the purposes of enforcing the criminal law, that there was a way of tracking the person. So these are the sorts of questions that you might ask. I've mentioned nudification apps and whether those are appropriate. Another question is terms of service and whether they adequately identify and describe the problem around non-consensual image abuse. So this could be about the sharing of images, but it could be more broadly about the use of the platform, and particularly the use of advertising, perhaps to recruit unwitting volunteers to this industry. Discovery and navigation, I've talked about. What do these services optimize? What do they prioritize? And could they do it better? User response is a way of identifying problem content. And as I've said, that there should be perhaps some way of recognizing expert voices within the user group as one mechanism for finding sorts of content that sometimes doesn't look that different from legitimate content. User tools might be useful. They don't necessarily take away the problem, but if somebody is suffering from, I think, the phrase digital tattoo, and seeing that material again or being tagged by people in relation to that material, having better controls over those sorts of engagements could be a benefit. Moderation is the final bit I want to talk about in terms of the model. I think we would all wish that major platforms did a better job of responding to user complaints and enforcing terms of service equally. What I would suggest is that as part of moderation requirements and standards is that they should have in-house appropriately qualified people who can spot the problem or who can recognize where there are issues or respond appropriately to victims of crime in this context. We put some other issues following on from this. Transparency specifically relates to the requirements of the Online Safety Bill. But I think providing information more generally as to the risk, the level of incidence, and what's happening on a service is a good idea, and can also help victim advocates and NGOs. It is important, I think, that there are resources for victim support and remediation, as you see there, and also that the platforms take responsibility for their supply chains, that they don't, say, deal with concerns about nudification apps by saying, oh, well, that was provided by somebody else, that's not our problem. Education and training quite often refers to media literacy, but here this relates back to the point I made, that those in-house, and particularly those in moderation, but also those, I think, in design, should be educated about the issues so that they at least stand a better chance of recognising them. And finally, vigilance over time is a recognition that the market changes, that services change, and so that solutions that work now may not be adequate going forward, and that we need to maintain vigilance over time. I will leave it there, but I'm happy to elaborate on any of that should anyone like to ask me about it, or even about the Online Safety Bill if people want to know about that.
Thank you, Laura. Lorna. Lorna. Thank you, Lorna. And also thank you for explaining the framework, and also that it's a very complicated, and I heard a very wrong the code of the Online Safety Act, and it's very thank you for your explanation of the the essence of the Online Safety Act. Thank you, Rona. And also next speaker, Sophie, please take the floor.
Thank you very much. And it's really lovely to be here today. I hope you can hear me over the background noise. It was in fact quiet when I started, but no longer. So I hope that's not too much of a problem. And I'm just sharing my screen. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work of the helpline, just to give a bit of a background. And then I'm going to talk about the law in the UK around intimate image abuse, the sharing of non-consensual intimate images without consent, and how the framing of that law creates barriers for victims to achieve any sort of redress or justice in many cases. But there are some changes coming, as Lorna's started to talk about. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then about stopnci.org, which is a fairly new project from us. So I'm going to start here. Hoping I can just change my slides. So the Revenge Porn Helpline was established in 2015, at the same time as it became a criminal offence in the UK to share intimate images without consent. And that came with a number of provisos, which I will go through in detail in just a minute. But since that time, the helpline has sort of established four fair areas of support. And those are where intimate images have been shared without consent, where there are threats to share intimate images, voyeurism, or the creation of intimate content without the knowledge of one of the participants in that, and sextortion, webcam blackmail, which is a very different dynamic, really. And around sextortion, we see that the majority of victims are male. But for the other three areas, and the majority of our work, predominantly victims are female, and as far as we can tell for those that disclose, perpetrators are male. But what we also have learned is that intimate images, whether they're shared or threatened to be shared, it's not something that happens in isolation. We see that people are always very often experiencing other issues as well. And you can see from this graph that somebody's having intimate images shared. They might also be experiencing harassment, having accounts hacked, personal information shared, what's called doxing, and behaviors such as collector culture, where content is shared and reshared and collected and traded on sites specifically for this purpose, where there may not be no connection with the original person who's in that content. Images that are violated in themselves of people and then reshared, domestic abuse, trolling. There are many behaviours that we see around the sharing of intimate images, and it's over the 8 years that we've existed, it's just become more and more clear that this is a really complicated area and sits very much under a systemic issue around violence against women and girls. So the law in the UK that came in 2015 had a number of criteria, and officially it is the disclosing of private sexual photographs and films with an intent to cause distress. And that intent to cause distress is something that creates a huge issue for somebody who's had intimate images shared or who's being threatened. Because, in fact, originally threats to share were not included in the legislation. That came in, I believe, in 2021 with the Domestic Abuse Act. But the criteria of an intention to cause distress, that's a very difficult thing to prove. And we repeatedly have clients who come to us and they know, and we can see the reasoning and that in the context of complicated behaviours, why that content has been shared. But demonstrating that to the police, or for the police to be able to demonstrate with the Crown Prosecution Service, who is the organisation that takes through criminal convictions in the UK, to demonstrate that in a court of law is very difficult, because the legislation itself has defences written into it. People can say that they didn't think that the other person would mind if they shared the content. They thought they had consent. They did it for money. These things are all acceptable defences, because it's very difficult. Because it also, regardless of whether distress was actually caused, there had to be that intention. So that's a massive barrier towards people coming forward and wanting to report to the police. The lack of anonymity that was provided, because it was classed as a communications offence, not who have experienced such a violation or are feeling so exposed and humiliated in front of their peers and their friends, family, work colleagues. The idea of standing up in court where their name will be read out and where that could be shared in the local media, that's just too big an ask, unfortunately, for so many people, completely understandably. Also, the definition of a private sexual image within the law is very narrow. It doesn't include underwear images. And we have a client, a long-standing client, who has approximately 150 images of her in underwear in a bedroom, and they do not fall within the definition of an intimate image. But I can assure you that to her, to us, to anyone that viewed that is very intimate content. It might not meet the standard of the law, but it is causing very real, long-lasting harm to that person. It also doesn't currently include manipulated or altered images. And we're seeing a significant rise now in deepfakes and the use of nudification apps that Lorna mentioned. And it's really important that we recognise as we move forward, we're going to see more of this sort of behaviour. And we need to look at our legislation and future-proof it. So we can see the difficulties that we see demonstrated by this data on reports that with the police. So the yellow bars are, this is research that was conducted through a Freedom of Information request that we commissioned with the University of Suffolk. And the yellow bars are incidents reported to the police. And I think I've got some numbers. In total, that's totals over the 2015 to 2022, that accounts for 24,010 incidents that were reported to the police. The red bar that you can see there is where charges were brought. That's 2,944 in total. So that's 12% of incidents that were reported to the police resulted in a charge. You might have to take my word for it, but there is a third bar there in a sort of grey-blue colour, which represents convictions. And that there are only 193 of those from the 33 forces that responded to our freedom of information requests. So that's 6.5% of charges resulted in a prosecution, but only 0.8% of reports. So less than 1% of reports that were made to the police over that 7-year period actually led to a prosecution, which is deeply concerning and is the sort of information that for somebody considering going to the police to report this would be deeply, deeply discouraging. I think it was clear from the first that the law was flawed in this area. I think we certainly learnt that very quickly. I think it was framed in a context where people thought this was about relationship breakdown, simply, as if that was ever simple anyway, when actually it's a much, much more complicated picture. But there has been a recognition of that, and several years ago, the government commissioned the Law Commission, which is the organisation in the UK that reviews legislation, and they produced a really thorough report recommending a complete overhaul of the law in this area. Of course, we now need to wait for our government to implement that, but there are really positive noises coming now that government intend to bring many of the changes that we would like to see in as part of the online safety bill as it works its way through the parliamentary process in the UK. And I think that those four main areas that I talked about around the intention to cause distress, anonymity, the inclusion of deepfake or manipulated images, and the definition of an image, we are hopeful that much of that is going to change. And that's really important. And on the online safety bill, I would also add that the work that Lorna has been doing with the End Violence Against Women Coalition, Glitch, and those other partners around the development of the code of practice is really, really important. And we fully support that work because we really believe that it'll serve to put the safety of women who are disproportionately affected by online abuse at the heart of this new regulatory framework and will lead to their greater safety. So just a quick headline on data as I move forward. You can see that the number of cases that we've had has hugely increased as time has gone past. That's the bar chart on the left, the number of people that have come to us. We implemented a chatbot in 2022, which accounts for the slight drop, but the chatbot sees a lot of people who come who are outside the UK, under 18 or experiencing sextortion. And you can see the number of images that we've moved. We've got a sort of around about 90% success rate in removing people's content. We've reported well over 300,000 individual images, and we've removed about 275,000 to date. So that brings me to stopncii.org, which is the removal of content is a huge part of the work that we do, and it's the first thing that people ask for when they come to us. It's more complicated that they need other sorts of support and opportunities for redress, but in those first crisis moments, what they look for is removal of their content. And we've worked really hard building relationships with industry. And Meta, inevitably the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, have been really, really critical partners in that, as that's a place, those are the platforms where your friends, your family, your work colleagues are, and it's people are very keen to see that content removed. So we have a long history of working with Meta on this to reduce the spread of non-consensual imagery. And they started some years ago now creating digital hashes, which is like a digital fingerprint, a unique identifier of an image. And they used these to stop the resharing of content. So if an image was reported to them as non-consensual intimate imagery, they would create a hash of that image. And then those hashes are applied in the same way that images of children, sexual images of children are stopped from sharing on the platform. They used those hashes to stop the resharing of non-consensual adult content. But they realized that they needed to evolve, and so they developed the Not Without My Consent program, which was where people could preemptively, for the first time, have hashes created to stop their content being shared where there was a credible threat to share that. But it was a slightly cumbersome process. There needed to be a referral organisation, and we were the referral organisation in the UK. And people had to come to us. We had to confirm that it was an intimate image. Then we would send them, make a referral. Then they were sent a link, and they had to upload their images. And then the hashes would be created and the images deleted by Meta. But understandably, I think people in this situation were very reluctant to share those intimate images with a major platform. and send them anywhere. So we wanted to look at how we could build something that would change that and would put some power back into the hands of people who were feeling deeply disempowered and threatened. So Meta came to us, and we talked long and hard about how we could change things. So moving forward, what was the vision? We wanted to develop a tool where the user would never lose control of their content. We wanted a tool that would be available to anyone wherever they were in the world, regardless of whether there was a support service. They would have access to that help. We wanted to develop a tool that could be accessed across multiple industry partners, wherever non-consensual intimate image content was shared. And so that brought us to stopncii.org. And so that's the front page of the website, which was launched in December 2021. And it allows people to come to the platform and create their own images. And I think the slides will just help me demonstrate. Oh, no, maybe they won't. So it's a free tool designed to support adult victims of non-consensual intimate image abuse globally. And it works by generating a hash from intimate content directly from your device, sometimes referred to as a digital fingerprint. That hash, as it's called, is unique to that image, and it cannot be reverse engineered if somebody were to access those hashes. StopNCI.org then shares their hash bank with participating companies so that they can help detect and remove the images from being shared online. Who can use StopNCI.org? Anyone who is over 18 in the image. The image must be sexual in nature, so it must include sexual acts, nudity or semi-nudity. It also includes deepfaked or manipulated images. The image must show the person creating the hash, but it doesn't have to show their face, and it doesn't matter if there's somebody else in it, but the person who is submitting the hash to the hash bank, they need to be in that content. We were very, very proud to work with NECMEC, who wanted to develop a version of the StopNCI platform for under 18s. And so it's the same technology that has now been launched just a few weeks ago by NECMEC. Take it down. So we're really keen to work with partners across industry to protect everyone as far as we can from having their nudes shared online. So what's the future? It's about building. The platform launched in December 2021, and our first participating partners were Facebook and Instagram. And then we marked our first birthday of the platform in December 2022 with the announcement that we were being joined by TikTok and Bumble to also to share in those hashes. And yesterday we were absolutely delighted at the UNCSW to announce that we were now being joined by OnlyFans and Reddit. So moving forward, our first focus is on adding to those platforms to take these hashes, to stop and slow the sharing and free sharing of this content. That's absolutely crucial, and we have really profitable and encouraging conversations going on with platforms across social media, adult sites. We're very conscious that's where a lot of this content is shared and reshared, and file sharing sites, hosting. We will be speaking to anybody that takes hashes, have the ability, technology to take hashes. Then we want them to take these to keep protecting people. We also work really closely with NGO services around the world because, as I said, we know that this content isn't shared in isolation, and people need further support. So we have an extensive list of partners on the platform, which is available in now 22 languages, and that will continue to develop, so that the platform will become further accessible to more and more people. And we want more people to join us. We want more people to know about the platform, to use the platform if they have any concerns that their content might be at risk, because it's really important that we put this power back into the hands of people to be able to protect themselves and not live in fear and deliver some peace of mind. So thank you very much for listening. I'll be here for the questions. If you have any questions, particularly about stopncii.org, there are FAQs. If you'd like to support the platform, anyone who would like to join as an NGO or platform who might be here, please email us at joinstopncii@swgfl.org.uk. And if you can't find the answer to your question or you want to talk more about the project, you can email me at sophie.mortimer@swgfl.org.uk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sophie, and for your presentations. A lot of information included, and also that thank you for sharing the so good practice and to protect the victims. And maybe some problems still happen. So, but maybe some challenges still you have some challenges you might have still, but. It is a very good lessons from you. Thank you so much. And now let us turn to our speaker from the United States, Michelle. Please take the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our guests. I'd like to start off and our panelists, especially those who have flown in from out of town to New York, to our hosts, to UN Women and Human Rights Now, and in particular, Maromi for coordinating this session. We are so grateful to each of you for your time, for your work. The presentation that I'll give today is designed with accessibility in mind. So it uses contrasting colors and large sans serif font. There are very few images that I will explain. As you know, the presentation will be available for distribution, and I will try to take a pause and speak slowly at each slide turn. Many of you are experts in this field. Nevertheless, if any subject matter arises that causes you discomfort, please do visit the CCRI Safety Center at cybercivilrights.org. Maromi asked me to speak today about challenges and best practices in raising awareness about, deterring, and providing support to individuals who have experienced image-based sexual abuse. Throughout this presentation, I will use the terms non-consensual explicit images, or NCEI, to speak more specifically about image dissemination. I'll also use the term IBSA, or image-based sexual abuse, coined by scholars Claire McGlynn and Erica Rackley. The four areas I'll touch on today, because we have 15 minutes, are our legislative landscape, community-wide support and direct services, recommendations for tech companies, and health and well-being for individuals who experience IBSA. I'll touch briefly on our legislative landscape. Please note that I am not a lawyer. I know that our president and legislative and tech policy director, Dr. Marianne Franks, had really wanted to be here today to meet with all of you. She actually will be joining the US delegation to CSW 67 as a non-government advisor. So in her absence, I'll do my best to highlight some challenges in our current legal landscape. First, many of you probably know that the US actually does not have a federal criminal law against NCEI distribution or sextortion. It was raised, I think, earlier in this session, the question about working across jurisdictions. And in the United States, we have a patchwork of state laws that are confusing for survivors and for law enforcement. And Sophie explained so well about the issues that arise around the intent to cause harm, which is something that we struggle with in the US as well. We also have Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which creates very high hurdles for charges against website operators who host IPSA. We also know from our research that the absence of a federal law does create harm for people who experience IPSA. So CCRI, led by Dr. Asia Eaton, our head of research, and Florida International University, we are funded by the National Science Foundation to conduct a two-part study. And the interview portion of this study included 36 participants, age 18 and over, residing in the US. The gender that the participants self-identified as included 14 women, 17 men, 3 trans women, and 2 unknown. They all experienced IPSA during roughly 18 months that correlated with the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States. And the following statements were shared during trauma-informed interviews. One participant said, "We should have laws that protect people. For example, people who their images or their videos, which are private, are posted without their knowledge or consent. There should be laws prohibiting or punishing people." A second participant said, "The legal system is it's so hard to navigate. There should be more material out there for it, and it should be easier to find." A third participant said, "The policies exist. There are actually remedies in my state. The problem is law enforcement doesn't know them, the courts don't know them, the attorneys don't know them." So what are we doing to meet this challenge? I mentioned our president, Dr. Marianne Franks. In 2013, 10 years ago, when CCRI was founded, she actually drafted a guide for legislators, as well as model state and federal legislation. And those models have served as templates for multiple state laws and pending federal bills. One pending federal bill that was recently reintroduced into the Senate just maybe a week ago. The number of US states prohibiting this abuse rose from 3 states in 2013 to 48, Washington, D.C., and the US territories of Guam and Puerto Rico. As I mentioned, this led to the introduction of the SHIELD Act, which was just reintroduced. Dr. Franks also served as the reporter for the Uniform Law Commission's civil remedies for the Unauthorized Disclosure of Intimate Imagery Act of 2018. And a version of that was included in the VAWA reauthorization of 2022 as the first federal law to provide a civil remedy for NCEI. And she's currently advising Illinois lawmakers on a recently introduced Digital Forgeries Act in regard to synthetic media or deepfakes. CCRI has filed nearly a dozen amicus briefs in support of state laws protecting online privacy. And those briefs, along with the scholarship of CCRI leadership, are frequently cited by courts. Our Vice President, Danielle Citron, and Marianne have testified to Congress on Section 230 reform and deepfake manipulation. And CCRI leadership have served as invited expert advisors to the White House Task Force to address online harassment and abuse. If you'd like to view any of the materials that I just referenced, you can visit the legislative reform page on CCRI's website. I will also note that today at 2 p.m., CCRI board member Hani Farid, who's actually known as the father of digital forensics due to his work on photo DNA. So going back to that hashing technology that Sophie mentioned earlier. Hani Farid and Marianne Franks will actually be testifying before the Subcommittee on Privacy Technology and the Law at 2 p.m. today. And I can put that link in the chat. I know many participants today will have many, many meetings to go to, but in case anyone is interested. So the second area that I can touch on today is community support and direct service. We have experienced challenges in the various supports available throughout our communities for individuals who experience IPSA. Our understanding is that attorneys, FBI reporting, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, local law enforcement, direct service organizations have all experienced extreme backlogs in the last few years. At CCRI, we've experienced a similar skyrocketing of caseload. Our image abuse helpline, which offers emotional support, information, legal referrals, and the like, served 5,600 callers in 2022. That was our highest annual call volume ever, and an increase of 87.1% as compared to the 2019 rate. In addition to those challenges, professional sex workers may face extreme barriers in accessing support due to social stigma, fear of law enforcement, theft of work product. I was so thrilled to hear yesterday when Sophie and Stop NCII made the announcement that OnlyFans in particular has joined Stop NCII. That's really such an incredible partner, and I'm so excited to hear about that. So in an effort to address this challenge, what we're doing at CCRI is trying to create tools that can empower the individual with immediate and comprehensive information. So that if they are waiting on hold or filing multiple reports, they can have access promptly to resources and information. In 2021, we launched the CCRI Safety Center, and that offers step-by-step guidance for individuals who are 18 years and older and who are experiencing IPSA. And last year, we published a CCRI bulletin related to sextortion scams. This is another area that touches on the cross-jurisdiction issues that were raised earlier. Many of the financial sextortion schemes that we see are cross-border and global in nature. And we'd love to ask attendees today to please help us disseminate these two tools to anyone in your caseloads, or to the offices where you work, your colleagues, your contacts. So third, I think that I'm seeing that I might be running out of time. 2 more minutes. Okay, I'll try to go quickly. Many of the recommendations that we have were actually mentioned by Lorna. For adult entertainment sites in particular, we recommend following the protocol for minors where age is indeterminate. So those individuals who are post-pubescent and where it's difficult to tell by visual inspection only if that individual is a minor or over 18. These sites we also recommend should not permit screenshots or downloads, should request confirmation, not just of age, but actually also of consent. And we know that that can't be verified, but even that friction might deter some potential perpetration. And professional productions can retain intimacy coordinators. We also know that many companies have their servers located in different countries of the world, so arriving at some common understanding or common global standards could be helpful. And for all tech platforms, we are eager to see prominent and easy to use in-app reporting. I think Lorna mentioned this, instead of relying on text-heavy reporting, responding to reports, including what action was taken in the app. I think actually I'll point to Facebook and Instagram, who I think offer a model that's quite useful there, allowing for anonymous and trusted flagger reporting. I'd really love to see conversation. I'd love to learn more about my end-to-end encrypted products, where we see the vast majority of perpetration take place. And also blocking previously identified NCP from being re-uploaded. Again, I really want to note Sophie's expertise that she's cultivated over years in this space. Stop NCII, which has made so many phenomenal inroads in blocking sort of the previously updated, uploaded NCP, as well as blocking images that have not yet appeared. And I know that technology is advancing to address cropped and filtered content. Hopefully that will be robust soon too. And one thing we also, that would be so helpful, would be if tech companies can disable repeat catfishing accounts, which generally groom thousands of users at a time, and those catfishing accounts will usually use the same image, a similar handle, including prominent warnings to deter searches. And also, we know that safe search and content controls are made available for family plans where there are children. And it could be helpful to raise those for adult users who simply might want to be allies and search in safer modes. If that's called something other than child safety, we really could see an uptick in use of those tools. I think Lorna mentioned as well human content moderators, and I think it's key to establish humane working conditions for those content moderators and to expand personnel significantly. We also recommend conducting an external audit as opposed to simply internal audits, and publishing annual transparency reports. I can touch on health quickly if we still have a few moments. Dr. Asia Eaton, again, in the research that I mentioned before, we noticed that individuals who have experienced IBSA are avoiding distressing feelings through 3 major strategies, and those include distraction, substance abuse, social withdrawal. And those who do seek support are disclosing to family and friends, participating in virtual communities, and seeking help from professionals. So making sure that individuals can seek support for their physical and mental health. It could be useful in health settings, particularly SANE nurses, if the intake questionnaire includes a question as to whether or not the assault was recorded, which would allow for a referral to take place immediately. We'd love to see new curricula developed at psychology departments to address image-based sexual abuse. And we always recommend, if someone is working with a therapist or talking to a friend, that they can recommend CCRI's website. And in the United States, we do face challenges with an overburdened and very expensive healthcare system. And so providing robust care at a reasonable cost would be helpful for all survivors. And taking a note, I can close here, from UN Women for leading this incredible convening related to tech-facilitated abuse, the World Health Organization can also incorporate IPSA prevention and survivor support in its comprehensive mental health action plan and related fact sheets. I will stop sharing there because I know I'm at time. And thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, and Michelle. And thank you for sharing this CCRI experience and for protecting the people. And especially, I'm so moved to hear that and, about mental health necessities because even the image is erased, but even he have to live with this kind of experience. And so thank you for your sharing your actions. So next we will hear about the situation in Japan. And Kazuko, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm so moved by the presentation made by other speakers, and the situation is very, very serious in all the countries, but we try to make a difference. So I'm going to talk about the situation in Japan, and my slide is not going very well. Okay. Yes. My name is Kazuko Ito, and I'm a Vice President of Human Rights Now, and also the human rights lawyers I practice in this area for 10 years. And I'm going to talk about the digital sexual violence against women in Japan. We have certain progress, but challenges. So I wanted to share my experience. And Human Rights Now is the organizer of this event, and we are international human rights NGOs with ECOSOC status. And then so we worked on that various kind of issues, including women's rights issue, children's rights issue, and business and human rights. And I'd like to say Happy International Women's Day. And so, yes. So this is the statistics about gender-based violence in Japan. And so online violence and offline violence against women and girls are deeply connected and reinforce each other. And also the rape culture is very prevailing in Japan. Then I wanted to explain that overview of the Japanese legal system. First of all, the rape crime in Japan is not content-based. So the definition of rape is quite narrow, and either use of force or threat is required to establish the crime of rape. So this is quite narrow. So that is why our Japanese government is right now, discussing how to amend this law. And also that we have the regulation on that obscenity, but again, the most of the pornography does not fall under this other definition. And we have the Act of the Child Pornography, but only apply to the person under 18 years old without any effective age verification system. And also the definition of the child porn is very narrow. And we have the Revenge Porn Act enacted in 2014, but recording or videotaping of sexual behavior without consent itself is not considered as a crime. And this is a huge problem right now. So without any consent, somebody is taking the sex of other people, and then that the people and women subjected to the kind of recording have enormous fear about that when it's going to be uploaded online. So this is a huge issue, and right now, Ministry of Justice in Japan is considering to amend the penal code to tackle the problem. But today, I'd like to focus more on the issue, really extremely serious problem that Human Rights Now has been tackling for years. This is that forced recruitment of women in the adult porn industry in Japan. So Human Rights Now, in 2016, published an investigative report on the issue, and that revealed that many young women who never intended to appear in porn were forced to do so. So many victims were deceived and believed that they are to be a model of talent when they are scouted and signed a contract with porn agency without knowing. And once the victim signs a contract, the agency demands them to perform porn. And then what they say is that this is, in the contract. You can't breach the contract. And if you refuse, you have to pay the high amount of the penalty fees. And if you cannot pay that money, we'll inform your parents and school. Then the women are tricked and no choice but, performing porn. So this is a very serious violation against women and human rights violation against women. So, this is the structure of entrapment. The scout is the first person to contact to the women. Often they deceive and trick women. You can be a model, you can be a singer, etc., etc., and then bring her to the agent, adult porn agent. And then women believing they can be, the dream job. But, and then without knowing that concludes a contract with adult porn agency. And then once the contract is signed, the adult porn agency have entire control over the women. And she had no decision-making power to act or reject any performance. And if she refuses, they pay the penalty fee, etc. There are lots of intimidations. And script of the video of the story are provided a day before or even the day of the filming. And Japanese adult porn usually includes real sex with multiple men, and women are sexually abused and tortured. So women cannot escape from the filming. And all the sexual intercourse, this is not consensual, are recorded and distributed through the internet. And filmmakers own the copyright permanently and use them over time. So victims suffer from endless digital sexual violence. That's the situation we highlighted. So we also highlight some case example. This is one example. And then victimization started from the high school age and recruited as a talent. But, later she was forced to do the adult porn. And when she rejected, she was, demanded around, say, 200,000 US dollars as a penalty fee. That's the issues. And this case is more serious. Women are forced to appear into porn, although she terminated the contract to the agency. She could not stop the distribution of pornographic video. And due to the stress, she committed suicide. Yeah, she died. That's the situation. Yeah, because for her, it is sexual abuse. And then sexual abuse against her is recorded and become a product. And everybody enjoy eternally. So this is very, very traumatized situations. And this is, the legal, not illegal. And the agency and filmmaker are rarely prosecuted, despite the forcible nature of the recruitment and the filming. And since the contracts show that women had given their consent to perform in the film. Yes. So huge impunity over the issues. But in 2016, we publicized this report as things are changed. After the publications, we got huge backlash from the industry. But I can't believe that it's really wonderful that some of the survivors voiced up. This is indeed true, happening to us, that they said. I really appreciate their courageous. And they led to change in both society and policy. In 2017, the Japanese government established the interministerial committee to tackle the issues, but not the regulation to the industry, but focusing on the prevention and awareness raising among young people. But we think it's not really enough. So we recommend comprehensive legislation to regulate that industry to prevent and protect the women and girls and sometimes boys. Yes. And then later on, 5 years later, last year, finally, Japanese Parliament adopted a comprehensive legislation to prevent and protect the victim of non-consensual porn. That's a huge success, for us. Numbers of reasons was behind. One of the reasons was that due to the COVID, that victimization has grown. And then I'm gonna try to, time is so limited, but introduce about the overview of the Act. One very important aspect is the procedural safeguard of the prevention of the non-consensual pornography. So Article 3 is talking about the fundamental principle that filmmakers shall not force a performer into any sexual act. And then based on that, the filmmakers are obliged to provide detailed written performance contract with additional explanatory documents to the performers. And from the contract to filming must have the period, 1 month period at least. And after the filming and to publication, there should be at least 4 months. That is, they'll try to ensure the victim to escape from the industry if they wish. Another important thing is that the law provides measures to prevent and end digital violence. So in case the filmmaker fails to meet the obligation under the Act, contract is either considered void or cancelled. But very important thing is Article 13 said performer can unilaterally cancel the contract without any reason before the publication and until 2 years after the publication. And the filmmaker cannot impose any sanction fee to the cancellation. And as a result of the cancellation of the contract, the filmmaker is obliged to restore the original state for the performers, including cessation of the publication. Yes. And the performer is entitled to demand the cessation and prevention of the publication of films. And also, the law accepts that the service provider are exempt from liability when they take measures to prevent transmission upon the request of the victim. And both natural and legal persons, that means company, are imposed criminal sanction when certain of the provision of the Act was violated. Yes, that's huge success and improvement for the victim of the cyber-based violence and non-consensual porn in Japan. Yeah, but this law was immediately implemented and enforced. So I'm now, as a practitioner, working on that cases, and then we found some challenges. So one challenge is that the problem of compliance, and some case shows that industry culture has not entirely improved, and also no governmental agency supervising the porn industry. So compliance is a problem. And there is no punishment for those who publish the porn video against the performer's demand in accordance with the Act. That's another issue. And huge issue is transnational cases. It's particularly difficult to solve. The case is like, filming is conducted in Japan, but the filmmaker sends this kind of material to the foreign platform. And foreign platform publish the porn online, and Japanese people can look at that. So this is a big problem, and we have to sue the foreign company in the foreign countries. That's the major issues right now. So we wanted to discuss with you guys. And to eliminate all the image and video online, the victim must go to the various governmental bureau in vain, and the response is very ineffective without any legal authority. the bureau can only advise to the victim or request to the operator to stop publication. There's no, the competence to order something to the private sector. That's something missing. So moving forward, so I would have some recommendation and something I'm really wondering. And one recommendation is to strengthen the duty of the government. So it's important to establish and assign the supervising authority to enforce the law. And also establish a one-stop victim support center to eliminate images on the videos. I had South Korean government establish one-stop victim support center. That's very good example, and we need to learn from that. And second recommendation is that imposing the duty of relevant industry, such as not only the filmmaker, but also the platformers, service providers, big tech companies, etc. And beyond the UN guiding principle of business and human rights, this is not binding, so binding obligation. For instance, the Japanese very famous platformer NTT does not really working on that issue. So we are tackling in the issue, but there is no mandatory law regulation to the platformer. That's another issue. And tackling the transnational cases. So this is, we welcome that the international discussion and international agreement, and also involvement with the service provider and big tech companies. That is really important. And another issue is that, this new legislation will be amended in 2 years. And we are reviewing the practice, and several, regulatory development is discussed among the civil societies. One is that the right to be forgotten. Even if you perform with consent, 10 years later, they wanted to eliminate all the images. Is there any that kind of rights? So this is one thing that the law should clarify. And expanding the sanction is very important. And other issue is whether certain activities should be regulated or prohibited. And for instance, sexual intercourse should be prohibited. That's a big argument in Japan. And also abusive conduct causing harm to the health and safety of women. That is another recommendation. And also in relation to the rape cultures, so like a UK law, then elimination of the rape and abuse images. That is another choice. So we are now discussing that how to improve this new law. So in the end, so I'd like to say we have a serious problem right now in Japan, but we try to tackle the issues. Yeah, but we need to improve a lot of things. Despite the fact we get very successful advocacy to achieve the law. Yes. So in order to protect women and girls, and sometimes boys online, we need to keep working on that issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kazuko. And as maybe now that you know that what's happened recently in Japan, and we human rights now doing a lot of work and to achieve this kind of the law. So next and the last speaker of this panel, and we will have our final speaker, Miss Cindy Gallup. Cindy, please take the floor.
Thank you. I'm going to talk briefly about why I started Make Love Not Porn and what it is. And then I want to share with you all 3 things that we do at Make Love Not Porn that I think will bring some different perspectives to this extremely important issue. So I started Make Love Not Porn 14 years ago because I date younger men, and I experienced for myself what happens when we don't talk openly and honestly about sex in the real world. Porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. So 14 years ago, I put up on no money a tiny clunky website at makelovenotporn.com that in its original iteration was just words. The construct was porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. I launched Make Love Not Porn at TED in 2009. My TED talk went viral. Thousands of people wrote to me from every country in the world, and I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so I turned Make Love Not Porn into a business designed to do good and make money simultaneously. So today, Make Love Not Porn is pro-sex, pro-porn, pro-knowing the difference. We are the world's first and only user-generated, 100% human-curated social sex video sharing platform. So we're kind of what Facebook would be if it allowed you to socially, sexually self-express. The way to think about us is, if porn is the Hollywood blockbuster movie, Make Love Not Porn is the badly needed documentary. We are a unique window onto the funny, messy, loving, wonderful sex we all have in the real world. We are socializing and normalizing sex, bringing it out of the shadows into the sunlight to promote consent, communication, good sexual values and behavior. We are literally sex education through real world demonstration. I designed Make Love Not Porn around a revenue sharing business model to democratize access to income. Our members pay to subscribe, rent and stream social sex videos. Half the income goes to our contributors, who we call our Make Love Not Porn stars. And here are three things we're doing that, as I say, bring some different perspectives to this issue. So the male founders of the giant tech platforms that dominate our lives today, they are not the primary targets, online and offline, of harassment, abuse, sexual assault, violence, rape, revenge porn. Therefore, they did not and they do not proactively design for the prevention of any of those things on their platforms. And as we've been hearing, we see the results of that every single day. Those of us who are most at risk every single day, women, Black people, people of color, LGBTQ, the disabled, we design safe spaces and safe experiences. I and my tiny team spent literally years concepting and designing Make Love Not Porn before we ever built it, because we knew that if we were going to invite people to do something they've never done before, socially share their real world sex, we had to think through every possible ramification of that to create a completely safe and trustworthy space. As a result, not only do we operate unlike anybody else in the adult sphere, we operate unlike anybody else on the internet, period. And that's because I designed Make Love Not Porn through the female lens to be the safest place on the internet. I designed it around what everybody else should have, nobody else did, human curation. There is no self-publishing of anything on Make Love Not Porn. Our curators watch every frame of every video submitted from beginning to end before we approve or reject the video, and we publish it. Nobody else does that. We review every post on every member profile, text, photos, illustration. And by the way, on Make Love Not Porn, your profile posts can be as safe work or not safe work as you like, but we review them and we approve and publish them. No one else does that. We review every comment on every video before we approve or reject it and publish it. Nobody else does that. We can vouch for every single piece of content on our platform in a way that nobody else can. And we take human curation to lengths nobody else on the internet has even dreamed of. It's not possible to complete our video submissions process unless your video is fully consensual and legal. We require full identifying details for every participant and 2 forms of government-issued ID. Most adult sites only require 1, including, by the way, if you've chosen to have somebody else behind the camera. Even if we never see them, we have to know exactly who they are. We need 2 forms of visual ID from them as well. But importantly, even when your video submission has passed all of those safeguards, our curators are briefed to watch those videos, and generally speaking, we're viewing just for, are they consensual, are they real? But our curators are briefed to watch those videos and, ask themselves, do I feel the camera is in a position where everybody knows it's there? Do I have a bad feeling about this video? Because our brief to our curators is a bad feeling is enough reason not to publish it. You don't have to follow that up with any kind of rational explanation. Also, when any of our Make Love Not Porn stars want their videos removed, we do that instantly. And when I say instantly, what I mean is we have no online application form. We have no process. All you do is you message us and we remove your videos immediately. The Make Love Not Porn star messaged us the other day, and within 10 minutes, their videos were gone. Nobody else on the internet anywhere does that. And I'm making this point because I want you to be aware that this is what the future of the internet looks like when it's designed and built by women through the female lens. But here in the US, last year, only 1.7% of all venture capital funding went to female founders. And that is equally true around the rest of the world. We are designing the future of the internet to give a better future to humanity, and we do not access capital to enable us to scale what we want to build. And that's something very important to bear in mind as we look at how we can role model for tech platforms what they should be doing. At Make Love Not Porn, we're tiny, we're bootstrapping, we have no money, and we've human curated everything for 10 years. Imagine what all those platforms with their billions could be doing if they chose to. So that's the first point I wanted to share. The second is, I designed Make Love Not Porn around my own beliefs and philosophies, one of which is that everything in life starts with you and your values. So I regularly ask people this question: what are your sexual values? And nobody can ever answer me because we're not taught to think like that. Our parents bring us up to have good manners, a work ethic, sense of responsibility, accountability. Nobody ever brings us up to behave well in bed, but they should. Because in bed, values like empathy, sensitivity, generosity, kindness, honesty, respect are as important as those values are in every other area of our lives where we're actively taught to exercise them. And I'm sharing this with you because ultimately, our mission at Make Love Not Porn is to end rape culture. And we work to do that by doing something incredibly simple that nevertheless nobody else anywhere on the internet is doing. We work to end rape culture by showing you how wonderful, great consensual communicative sex is in the real world. Our social sex videos role model good sexual values and good sexual behavior. And here's the important part. We make all of that aspirational versus what you see in porn and popular culture. We are reinventing aspirational culture around sex in order to drive the massive emotional mindset shift that has to happen to end rape culture. And what is interesting too is that I designed Make Love Not Porn to be fully diverse and inclusive, and we are. Our members, our Make Love Not Porn stars, are male, female, trans, non-binary, straight, LGBTQ, all races, ethnicities. But we've observed in the 10 years we've been operating that we are especially a revelation to men. More men write appreciative emails, leave appreciative comments with Make Love Not Porn than anybody else, because we are something unique men will find nowhere else on the internet, which is a safe space where men can be and watch other men being open, emotional, and vulnerable around sex. You wouldn't believe the number of men who write to us and say, I just watched my first video, Make Love Not Porn, and afterwards I cried. I wish society understood the opposite of what it thinks is true. Women enjoy sex just as much as men, and men are just as romantic as women. Yet neither gender is allowed to openly celebrate that fact. We'd all be a lot better off if they were. And so we are one of the solutions to toxic masculinity, which is one of the underlying social cultural dynamics that drives this appalling issue that we're all here to talk about today. And the third and final point that I want to share with you is, our community at Make Love Not Porn writes to us every day, telling us how we've changed their lives. I have seen firsthand every day for the past 14 years the enormous human unhappiness and misery caused by the shame, embarrassment, and guilt with which we imbue sex. The issue we're talking about today is massively exacerbated by this societal guilt and shame. And when I talk about our vision at Make Love Not Porn, of one day being the Facebook of social sex, of destigmatizing sex in the real world, bringing it out of the shadows into the sunlight, I talk about the fact that one day nobody should ever have to feel embarrassed or ashamed about having a naked photograph or a sex video of themselves posted on the internet, because it's simply just a natural human part of who we all are. That day is a very long way off. But we also help shift the dynamics around this issue when we take the shame, the guilt, and the embarrassment out of the universal human experience that we are all most engaged with and most messed up about. And an indication of how powerful it is when we do that is that I've been really blown away at Make Love Not Porn to be contacted by many survivors of rape, sexual assault, sexual abuse, who tell us that we help them reclaim their bodies. We help them feel able to be sexual again. And that's not just our members who view our videos, but our contributors, our Make Love Not Porn stars, who tell us that sharing themselves sexually in a completely safe space help them process and heal from sexual trauma and abuse. And so, as I said, I wanted to share with you how we operate, to just bring some different perspectives to play on this issue, to look at what all of the tech platforms could be doing if they chose to do it. Our human curation model is eminently scalable. It's simply our version of any enterprise software unicorn's human sales force. They hire thousands of people to sell. You can absolutely hire thousands of people to curate. It's important to think about how we end rape culture and reinvent aspirational culture around sex, so that what everybody wants to model is good sexual values and behavior. And it's also really important to take the shame, the guilt, and the embarrassment out of sex, which absolutely exacerbates all of the issues we're talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. And also that you say that stop rape culture is very important and in every countries, and also that I'm so moved because safe space for sexual behavior should be happened in the digital setting, not only a real world, and also that even the a digital world and safe space and for the people should be keep should be keep. And thank you for Cindy. And also that now we have a very good and not good, very good, and so more than good. The presentation and happened, and also that now we should turn to the panel discussion. So could you join us to the panel discussion? So we prepared 5 topics for the panel discussion. So maybe so you would like to add something, and after you heard other presentation, and so, and also that we so welcome to something add for your presentation. Do you have any comment about the discussion question? Maybe the law. I'm thinking that every country has own laws and to protect the safety in the online, and especially relating to the unconsensual sexist images. And also, every country has some kind of the criminal law to protect the people and from unconsensual abusive sexual images. But the criminal law is necessary. But as the Sophie mentioned, not all the cases will be punished. So of course, criminal law is needed in some contents, but the punishment is necessary, but it's not the only the solution for protecting the people. So, do you have any comment about legal things? And maybe the Michelle you mentioned about there's no and federal the law and against the non-sexual non-consensual sexual images. And so, do you have any comment about
Sure.
about that?
Sure, yes, thanks so much. Two items. Yes, right now we do not have a federal law, federal criminal law regarding misconduct. As I mentioned, that has been introduced into the Senate just last week. I'm sure someone might want to know, oh, Michelle, do you think it's going to pass this time? Well, I thought it was going to pass last year, so it's difficult for me to have a crystal ball and understand what will happen in that regard. But I think there was a question earlier about whose responsibility it should be, or to remove images, and also, what kind of happens with tech companies? How are they involved, and what kind of responsibility do they have? And I mentioned in my 15 minutes that there's actually a subcommittee hearing today that is relevant to this subject. And I cannot share that in the chat, I don't think. I can share it with hosts and panelists. So I will put this to hosts and panelists, and maybe one of our hosts can share that with the group. And this hearing will refer to Section 230 of the CDA and broadly what responsibility tech platforms have in regard to this kind of conduct.
Okay, thank you. And also, I saw is that I couldn't see the Sophie's raise your hand. And could you say something about the legal things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think laws are really important, obviously, and as I said in my 15 minutes, we do have a law in the UK, and we've had it since 2015. It's not really fit for purpose anymore, but there is work that is going on around that. But legislation isn't the only thing that you need, because we have legislation now but our law enforcement don't really understand it. People that go to the police get confusing messaging back. So we need a huge amount of awareness raising and training, serious training with our law enforcement frontline professionals, so that they understand what the law is, what it means, how you apply it to people with real lived experiences, how to collect evidence. There is no consistent understanding, even in one part of the UK, even in England, about what meaningful evidence that will succeed in a prosecution looks like. So I think there's a huge amount of work to do. I think legislation is really important. It's that cultural line drawn in the sand where we say this is not acceptable behaviour, but it needs so much more than that.
Okay, and how about Laura?
Following up from what Sophie said about the need to give training to law enforcement, there is a question about resources as well. They need adequate resources. I think if we're talking online, there is a question between how we want to treat the people who are creating the content and sharing it, which is one sort of culpability and sort of an engagement, and how we treat the platforms and the distributors, and they may actually have different engagement with content as well. So I think we can't just say it's a one-size-fits-all approach. We may want to have one set of laws for the people creating the content who are in a position to know that this is non-consensual, perhaps other laws in relation to different sorts of distribution. So
Yeah, okay, so thank you, Luna. So I so impressed your for and framework, and also that the first there might be happens content creation, and so also that maybe the in the stage of content creation, and we have to think about is this abusive or not, and then the consensual or unconsensual, and a lot of things I have to think about a creation level. And also the once the some images are created, and also then the next stage happen. And also the we I'm thinking so maybe we should think about the how to create better and sexual images, and also that like the Japanese situation, and Kazuko mentioned there's a filming is a part of creation. So these are kind of things this is very important. And also that maybe the time is only 20 minutes, and also that maybe there's so many questions and comes to, so it is very difficult to read through. So and maybe the Maromi or the what you could the panelist, and you could read through the question, and so could you answer some question, and you could pick up and some question. I'm sorry, so time and so limited, and so we could answer in all of the questions, but maybe we have some questions. So maybe first
Just so you know, I've answered the questions directed at me.
I know. Okay.
So you don't need to ask me.
I know that. So the question comes to Sophie and Cindy, and also that and the UK and the Japan, and so why don't you start from the Sophie, and how about could you answer the question to you?
Yeah, of course. So the first question there is about opportunities to update the legislation in the UK, and yes, I'm pleased to say that there are moves afoot. So the law was reviewed by the Law Commission in the UK. They started their work about 3 years ago, and they reported back last summer to government with a complete overhaul of the law around recommendations of the law around taking, making, and sharing intimate images. And for anyone who knows anything about UK politics and the parliamentary timetable, it's quite full of a lot of other things. So getting space and time and attention on this issue has been really, really challenging. But through a lot of work from a lot of people, it's now coming through as part, hopefully, of the online safety bill. We're optimistic that there's going to be an amendment coming to include some of these changes into that legislation. It's not going to be everything that the Law Commission recommended, but it's going to be a good start, I think, in removing some of those barriers that make it very, very difficult for people to report what has happened to them to the police. But like I said, there's still lots more to do. I hope that more will come down the line, and I'm told that is the intention. But yeah, there's still lots of other things to do that haven't been thought of around helping us to remove content. So it's a moving field, definitely, but early steps in the right direction.
I will, if it's okay, answer the next question, which is to me, because again, I think it's important for people to hear what designing an internet platform through the female lens really means. So the question is, to me, do you have any tools to avoid users from downloading the material? So again, part of concept in designing our platform was building in a ton of security from the ground up. So the answer is absolutely. In 10 years of business operation, we have never had any of our videos downloaded from the platform. Now, because we have struggled to raise funding, and by the way, I'm working to raise a round of serious funding right now, and if anybody in the audience knows any open-minded investors, send them my way. But the thing now that people can do is screen record. There is technology to prevent screen recording, and that's one of the things I'm raising funding for, because I want to be able to implement that across my platform. But again, in 10 years of business operation, we've had exactly 2 instances of somebody screen recording our videos and publishing them on porn platforms. They are clearly our videos because every video is watermarked with Make Love Not Porn. And in the first instance, somebody published some videos to Pornhub, and one of our members alerted us to this because we've been going for 10 years, infuriatingly, the big porn sites use the tag Make Love Not Porn to try and hive off traffic from us and direct it to them. So we were made aware of this. I will say this for Pornhub. They do have a very efficient DMCA takedown process. So we instantly reported these, got them taken down within 24 hours. We emailed it was only a handful of Make Love Not Porn stars. We emailed all of them, telling them what had happened, telling them what we'd done. Rather fortuitously, the majority of the videos were, we have a category on Make Love Not Porn, which is, we are the only place on the internet where porn stars share videos of the sex they have in the real world, which demonstrates the difference between porn and real world sex. Because the sex porn stars have in their real world relationships is not the sex they perform professionally. The majority of these Make Love Not Porn stars fell into that category. They all went, fine, I'm all over the internet anyway. There are a couple of non-porn star everyday people who said they really appreciate our care and concern. In the second instance, these were published to other porn platforms. I did my research. I found the name and the email address of the CEO of the server that hosted these platforms. I went after him, and I know a number of high-profile people in the tech world, which I used, and he ordered our videos removed from those platforms immediately. I don't know of any other platform whose CEO would go to that much trouble to make damn sure that that content was removed immediately. So only 2 instances in 10 years of operation, working to raise the funding to put inability to screen record across our platform, and that will never be possible again. But that is how seriously we take the issue of any dissemination beyond our platform of our content, and how much we make sure it's removed to protect our members and our Make Love Not Porn stars.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. And also the fourth question, maybe someone could answer that. Are there any discussion about how to prevent a profit-driven market that may express the women against for the victimization? Oh, Michelle, please.
Sure. So in reading the question, I think the second part is around profit around deleting the images. I think that there's a couple parts to that question, so I'll tackle that part. So in the US, and I'm sure globally, there are a number of subscription services that will do what's called reputation management, and will use certain tools to work with somebody to find where they are online, either their names, their addresses, other public information, private information that they don't want public, including images. And this serves a purpose because it lifts some of the time burden and some of the anguish that someone who has experienced IPSA would have to allocate to that search, even if that search is a bit quicker these days than it was perhaps 5 years ago. One thing for CCRI is sometimes people ask us to endorse a certain business, and we cannot do that. What we encourage individuals to do is two things. Number one, definitely look at the terms and conditions of those image monitoring services and look at their cancellation policies, because often there are subscriptions that have a monthly fee or a quarterly fee or have a bundling of some sort. So definitely pay attention to those terms and conditions. And second, we recommend looking at online reviews of that company. And then third, please know that CCRI does not endorse. We do not not endorse any of these companies. If you see our logo on the pages for any of these companies, please know that we do not endorse them, and that there is some sort of misunderstanding in that. And CCRI does not charge for any of our services. So we do ask people to be alert for scams and so forth.
Thank you, Michelle. Now, how about Rona?
Thank you. I think in the UK there are probably reputation management services equivalent to what Michelle was talking about. I would just say that in the UK we probably still have the right to be forgotten as a tool in that regard, which I think was mentioned by one of the other panelists. But just to say that if the question is trying to hint at the fact that a platform that is hosting content refuses to take content down unless there is a payment, I wonder whether that is a form of extortion, but I'm not a criminal lawyer. But to say that within the framework of the Online Safety Bill or the Online Safety Act, as it will be, it requires platforms to have effective responses to complaints. And I cannot imagine that making people pay for that is going to be acceptable. The bill in particular says that platforms must enforce their terms of service. So I would say that quite apart from questions as to whether this is bad enough as a behaviour to engage the criminal law, it's unlikely to comply with the UK regime when it comes into force.
Thank you, Rona. And how about Sophie? You want to say something about that?
Yes, I was just going to say, I think any platform that asks for payment for the removal of content is not operating in good faith, and I would strongly encourage anybody not to do that. But on the Revenge Porn Helpline, we've had cases where people in the UK have gone to UK reputation management companies, and then those companies have come to us to remove the content, which you can understand just, a little bit, difficult to deal with. But we found ways around that. But some of these companies are not operating ethically, I would argue, and we are very clear that the service that we offer, we are effective as anyone else beyond anybody who has a direct ability to remove that content, and we are a free service and will remain so.
And Kazuko, do you want to say something about the Japanese situation relating to these issues?
That we don't really have, the right to be forgotten, and the new law just enforced. And so, that most of the case, we don't really have the industry like UK or US at all. So there is no, reputation risk management service at all. So, maybe next step, maybe we will have this kind of problem, but not yet.
So we have a lot of challenges in Japan. So, and also there's the last question. And is there any project of the international agreement about removing images, the video online? So it will be very important. I think so as well. And do you have any comment about that, about this question? Or
I don't think so. So that is why we hold this, meeting. So, there are lots of laws and we have tackling a lot of problems, but there is no international agreement. So that is why transnational cases has enormous difficulty. I hope that some, effort to be made to achieve the international agreement. As a treaty is the best way, but not only treaty, but also some industrial agreement would be very desirable. I was so, encouraged by the speech made by Cindy, and then that kind of good example and best practice would be incorporated to all the industry. That, is also desirable. Yeah, thank you very much.
and also that the time is only the 4 minutes left, and so maybe I need some very very short comment and from every speakers and say something that so many people participating in this panel it's a very have a lot of challenges. And do you have any encouraging message to the people who are combating this kind of situation? So maybe the first and Luna, and also Sophie and Michelle and Kazuko and Cindy. So could you say only the few words and about the promoting our our further the challenges? So.
Thank you. I'd like to pick up on what Kazuko just said. I think there is an importance for international cooperation. Maybe not a treaty. I think that would be very ambitious. But I think if we even just our various groups, the NGOs and the like, if we talk to each other and try and develop an understanding and perhaps some common solutions and share best practice, then we can start saying there is an international community here and this is acceptable and that is not. And even if it is just the court of public opinion, maybe we can start to use that.
Thank you, Rona. And how about Sophie?
Yeah, completely agree with Lorna. And part of the work that I'm doing around Stop NCII is we have our NGO partners from organisations around the world is to create exactly that dialogue and that working together, because a lot of these sort of solutions and conversations are happening in very sort of white, westernised, industrialised countries. But we need to recognise that intermittent image abuse looks different around the world, and we need to develop solutions that need to be global solutions. The internet is a global thing, so we need global solutions that can flex to suit different communities and cultures, because we're not a one size fits all globe, and I would never want us to be. But so it's exactly that communication I'm really trying to build. It's quite a big planet, really, but there's a lot of goodwill at the moment, and there's a lot of awareness raising, and events like this. And a lot of the events that are happening at the UNCSW is really doing a huge amount of work to raise awareness and keep this conversation moving. And if you want something positive, I do think we are definitely moving forward and getting people at sort of very high levels of government and policy development, and yes, tech companies to recognise the importance of this issue, and that it is really time to do something about it.
Thank you, Sophie. Is it
Maybe
Michelle?
Cindy will go, and so I would like
Okay,
Cindy to remark
Cindy.
first.
Okay.
If you don't mind, because
So.
I'm afraid I have to jump off in a moment. So,
Okay.
I'm regularly asked in interviews, usually at the end of the interview by the journalist. So, Cindy, when do you think all of this will change? When do you think we'll be less messed up about sex? And my response is always, you asked that question in the wrong way because you asked it in the passive tense. All of this changes when you and I and everyone else make it change, and I don't wait for things to change, I make them change. I'm blown away by what every person on this panel today is doing to change and solve this appalling issue. And I just want to say that I'm enormously optimistic because of all the work we're doing, and because we're all doing it through the female lens, that we will absolutely drive change around this, and we will see a very different picture in a few years' time. And I'm just very heartened and very, very happy to have been a part of this discussion. So thank you all very much indeed. I've got to go.
Yeah, and thank you, Cindy. Cindy should go to another the webinar or something like that. So thank you, Cindy. Okay, so maybe the next one is Michelle.
Can I just say, Cindy extraordinary or what? Just what a phenomenal speaker, what phenomenal work she's doing. That was very inspiring. So there was a question posed about cooperation across national boundaries, and CCRI has done a very small amount of this in select and very, very complex cases. And so really what that is complex case management with a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different professionals. And if you do that just in your own state or in your own country, really complex cases can take 10 months to sort through. And working globally is introduces other considerations around obtaining consent from everyone involved, finding times to meet, having translators and interpreters, understanding the different professions and professional titles that are involved. And each time I've been involved in something like this, there are usually around 20 professionals who are involved in different countries. So we've done this. It's extremely complex case management. And I think that there's room there for models and systems to be built. It might be we might be a little bit far off from that, but it's certainly possible. And in fact, before Stop NCII was on the scene, Sophie and I actually did a little bit of cross-border case management on a case. It wasn't that detailed, but even in that situation alone, I think we had to talk 5 or 6 times, and we had to be very, very careful around consent, around all kinds, and how we were communicating, because that kind of thing you're not really going to be talking about over email. So we had to talk to each other. So I think that there's room to build out models, build out staffing, get resources outside of the treaties and global commitments. Rolling that out on the ground is, I think, an opportunity that we all can explore.
Yes, thank you, and Michelle. And Kazuko, could you say something about closing as a closing remarks, and the time so limited, and so
Okay.
yeah, you could close our panel.
Okay, thank you very much, and Rona, Sophie, and Michelle, and Cindy, for your great presentation, and we learned a lot. That's so inspiring in that, that the improvement is law and practices and your partnership with that, private sectors that really, that inspire to all of us. And not only myself, but also to the many participants. This is issue that women and girls and sometimes boys are seriously hampered. And so we need to tackle the issues Yes, and also I'm so inspired by that seeing this, that this is possible. Sometimes, that industry can do that. So this is possible. I was so inspired. So thank you very much. And then in my case, this is the first time for me and for Human Rights Now to share that the new laws development internationally. I hope that someone was learn from our activities and encourage, and then same law and same situation, we can make some suggestion to solve the problem. Yes, and so maybe this network is I think it's great, and then so let's keep in touch, and then maybe we can start from that that set up the own the guiding principle of something, and then all the business, be tech company or service provider must agree on that. So maybe this could be a starting point of the discussion. Please stay in touch. Thank you very much. And also thank you very much for the participant. So thank you.
So thank you very much. And so then now we close this panel. And so thank you for the speakers, and thank you for the participants. And if you're interested in the involved this project, and please the contact to the Human Rights Now. Thank you so much. And this is thank you for attending.
Thank you so much
Thank
to
you.
everyone for attending
Thank
and
you.
to Human Rights Now.
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you for
Thank you so
today. It's been a
much.
great event.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.